その日石堂には掲げる御旗がない。
FX's Shogun Miniseries just wrapped up Lord Toranaga's ascension to power with the perfect finale. I know most people were expecting more violence, more blood, and probably a grotesque battle at the end. But believe me when I say this, the beauty of Shogun's 10-hour run lies in its beautiful details. The show ends on a perfect note, finally allowing us to understand what really lies in Yoshi Toranaga's heart. Amidst the chaos, there was one guy who kept alerting everyone about the Lord of Kanto's grand plan right from the beginning. Although he has been portrayed as a villain, I believe Lord Ishido to be a visionary, given he was the only one to figure out Toranaga's treacherous schemes. In real life too, both Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari were valued as Toyotomi Hideyoshi's loyal retainers, and contributed to his cause in unifying Japan. But after the Taiko's death, while Ishida, like in the show, played by the books and governed alongside the Council of Elders until their heir came of age, Ieyasu, on the other hand, went on a power expansion quest, allying himself with the enemies of the Toyotomi regime, and marrying multiple women to expand his empire. Ishida was quick to understand his plans and proposed to execute him for treason. Sadly, no matter how much the poor guy tried, he was no match to Tokugawa's cunning strategies. Till now, we've covered the real-life tales of Lord Toranaga, John Blackthorn, Lady Tora Mariko, Lady Ochiba no Kata, and Lord Ono Harunobu. Finally, it's time for us to discuss the real-life story of Lord Ishido Kazunari. So without wasting another moment, let's get right to it. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
太后様はご生前どの女子よりも落ち葉の方様を褒めておられました。
Ishida Mitsunari's early life. Ishida lived through the blood-stained Sengoku period of Japan, which was a warring era in the land, where all warlords continuously fought for power. Born in 1559 in the Omi province, Ishida Mitsunari was the second son of Ishida Masatsugu, who was then a loyal retainer of Azai Nagamasa, the powerful head of the Azai clan. In the 1560s, Oda Nobunaga of the Oda clan was growing in power and initiated a campaign to unify Japan. This resulted in the siege of the Odani Castle, which was the final stand of the Azai clan, as Nagamasa knew he had no way out but to face his defeat, and thus chose to embrace seppuku. Following the Azai clan's demise, the Ishida clan severed ties with them, in order to save their lives. Nobunaga later rose to power as the shogun after taking down Ashikaga Yoshiaki, who was then the shogun of Japan. Ashikaga was forced to shave his head and go into exile, after embracing his life as a Buddhist monk. During this period, a young Ishida Mitsunari grew up witnessing the de facto ruler of Japan destroy the clan his family had once served. Legend has it that apparently Mitsunari spent most of his youth as a thoughtful monk in a Buddhist temple, having lived and worked there since childhood. But one day, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a powerful samurai and one of Oda Nobunaga's most favored retainers, visited the same temple. Mitsunari was known for his attentiveness and has served tea to Hideyoshi during his visit. He generously poured the first cup of a large green tea, which was warm but not too hot. Hideyoshi, finding both the amount and temperature to be perfect to his liking, consumed it in one satisfying gulp. Ishido served him tea for the second time in the same cup, but this time it was slightly hotter than before and was offered in a smaller quantity. Hideyoshi, now relaxed, savored this cup more leisurely, finding the temperature to be perfect for his palate. Finally, the third cup was presented to him in a smaller bowl, and was notably hotter than the previous ones, allowing Hideyoshi to enjoy it calmly. Immensely impressed by Mitsunari's impressive skills, Hideyoshi appointed him as his staff, marking the beginning of Mitsunari's loyal service as a retainer under the Toyotomi clan. Ishida Mitsunari's rise to power under the Toyotomi regime. As a samurai under Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Ishida Mitsunari rapidly rose through the ranks because his intelligence had often come in handy and worked out in favor of the Toyotomi clan. By 1580, as Oda Nobunaga's quest for dominance in Japan continued, Hideyoshi still served the Oda clan as a daimyo, and took the young Mitsunari to his first battle, to the siege of Tottori. This grueling 200-day siege ended with the lord of the castle choosing to commit seppuku, so his garrison could be saved from resorting to the horrors of cannibalism. As Mitsunari was familiarizing himself with the brutal realities of war, a year later Hideyoshi again took him along to participate in the Battle of Takamatsu, where Oda Nobunaga had tasked him to take control of the Chugoku region. This directive led Hideyoshi to lay siege to the Takamatsu Takamatsu Castle, which was being defended by Shimizu Muneharu, a vassal of Mori Terumoto, from the Mori clan. The battle ended with the Mori clan's defeat, and allowed Ishida Mitsunari to be significantly recognized for his perseverance in the battle. But while he was solidifying his reputation as a samurai, Oda Nobunaga, along with his eldest son, Oda Nobutada, were betrayed by his most trusted general, Akechi Mitsuhide. With no way out, the powerful daimyo was forced to commit seppuku and met his end at the famous Honoji incident. Now, this shocking event created a huge power vacuum in Japan, and sparked a succession crisis within the Oda clan. When Nobunaga's second and third eldest sons, Nobukatsu and Nobutaka, were fighting over their father's seat, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, being the late lord's loyal retainer, called for a council to resolve this crisis. Ultimately, it was decided that because the throne had rightfully belonged to Oda Nobunaga's eldest son, Oda Nobutada, the right thing would be to pass the clan's leadership onto Nobutada's 3-year-old son, Oda Hidenobu. Hideyoshi then went on to fight the Battle of Yamazaki to take down his late lord's betrayer. After killing Akechi Mitsuhide, Hideyoshi was automatically propelled into a position of power and influence, wherein he positioned himself to lead the Oda clan until Nobunaga's grandson, Hidenobu, reached the appropriate ruling age. Unfortunately, one of Nobunaga's trusted generals, Shibata Katsuie, was not very happy with this decision, and allied himself with Oda Nobutaka and Tagikawa Kazumasu to rebel against Hideyoshi's authority. In response, Hideyoshi entrusted Ishida Matsunari with a critical mission to spy on Shibata Katsuie's army. Mitsunari understood the risks of the mission and knew that if he ever got caught, it would be his head on a pike. Nonetheless, he used his skills to complete the entire mission without being seen and provided his valuable intelligence to Hideyoshi. Every piece of information that Mitsunari passed on had proved to be immensely useful in 1583, during the Battle of Shizugatake. It is said that Mitsunari was the Ichiban Yari of this battle, meaning he was the first person to punch his spear into an opposition soldier, courageously fighting the war on the front lines. Following the Battle of Shizugatake, Shibata Katsuie was left with no choice but to retreat to Kitanosho Castle, which quickly came under siege by Hideyoshi and Mitsunari. Despite urging his wife Oichi and their daughters to elope, she chose to remain and join him in death, while allowing their daughters to escape. The aftermath of this entire conflict solidified Toyotomi Hideyoshi's position, granting him full influence over the Oda clan. Soon, Mitsunari became one of the trusted vassals of the most influential daimyo in Japan, and received many acclaims for his unfettered support for the Hideyoshi clan. Later, Hideyoshi had invited Oda Nobunaga's surviving son, Oda Nobukatsu, along with a few other samurai generals at the Osaka castle, as a means to pay their homage to him. But instead, Nobukatsu decided to break all his ties with Hideyoshi and allied himself with Tokugawa Ieyasu, the same guy who inspired Lord Toranaga's character in Shogun. The Tokugawa clan was then rising in power, which created obvious tensions between him and Hideyoshi, ultimately leading to the Battle of Komaki and Nagakute in 1584. Ishida Mitsunari was then a kenshi, or a survey magistrate for the Toyotomi regime, at Gamo County within the Omi province. He was also a part of both of these battles, and once again laid his life down to defend his lord. But despite the campaigns, both the wars proved to be fruitless, as all sides eventually reached a peaceful resolution. Although he spent most of his youth in battles, much of Mitsunari's reputation had sort of drifted when Hideyoshi appointed him as a financial manager, after recognizing his impeccable calculation skills. Starting in 1585, Mitsunari slowly transitioned into administrative duties, almost becoming an indispensable retainer for Hideyoshi. This eventually paved the way for Hideyoshi to appoint Mitsunari as the daimyo of the famous Sawayama Castle in the Omi province, with the additional gift of providing him with a 500,000 koku fief. During this period, Mitsunari's wealth grew significantly, as he had forged a very close friendship with Toyotomi Hideyoshi. In 1588, Hideyoshi asked Mitsunari to assume charge of the renowned sword hunt, which was a campaign aimed at confiscating weapons from potential adversaries of the new Toyotomi regime. In this endeavor, Hideyoshi had implemented strict measures, which included forbidding peasants from possessing any sort of weapons in order to prevent uprisings and ensure stability in the land. As Ishida Mitsunari's influence continued to rise within the Toyotomi clan, Hideyoshi entrusted him with the task of subduing many fortresses, whose retainers still remained loyal to the Hojo clan, and resisted Hideyoshi's efforts to unify Japan. At this juncture, Mitsunari had become one of Hideyoshi's senior retainers, and in 1590, he led 23,000 troops to surround the Oshi castle, which steadfastly resisted the multiple assaults launched by his forces. Mitsunari then took a page out of Hideyoshi's tactics and attempted to reenact the siege of Takamatsu. He flooded the defenders of the castle by constructing over 28 kilometers of dikes. Despite everything he did, the castle defiantly withstood his onslaught for over a month before finally surrendering. This victory at Oshi Castle had brought immense fame to Mitsunari's name, as he became known as the man who made the castle of Oshi float. By 1591, Hideyoshi had finally achieved his long-desired unification of Japan, and ascended as the de facto ruler of the realm. Given that Mitsunari had always been one of his most loyal vassals, historical texts documented a huge rise in his influence during this period, as a favored man of Japan's most powerful figure. The Imin War. Over time, Ishida Mitsunari held a very prestigious position among Toyotomi Hideyoshi's government of bureaucrats. He was renowned for his unwavering character, and had also forged many meaningful friendships with other important Toyotomi retainers. However, Mitsunari also made a few enemies at Hideyoshi's court, who were not exactly very fond of his goody-two-shoes attitude. Among them were Kuroda Nagamasa and Hachisuka Iemasa, who were treasured by Hideyoshi for their martial prowess. Plus, there was also Hideyoshi's nephew, Kobayakawa Hideaki, who began to hate Mitsunari's guts for good reason. In 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi assembled an impressive army of 225,000 soldiers for a spring invasion of the Korean peninsula. This force included a significant number of samurai warriors, renowned for their skills as elite horsemen and foot soldiers. Most of them were war-hardened professionals who grew up through the challenges of the Sengoku period. During this time, Hideyoshi had sent his most skilled emissaries to negotiate with the Korean officials on his behalf. Among them were Ishida Mitsunari, along with Mashita Nagamori, the lord of Koriyama Castle, and Asano Nagamasa, Hideyoshi's brother-in-law and chief advisor. The Imin War, as Japan's invasion of Korea was known, witnessed two brutal campaigns in 1592 and 1597, with a temporary truce in between. Despite Ishida Mitsunari's distinguished accomplishments in Hideyoshi's court, he was ridiculed by Kuroda Nagamasa and Hachisuka Iemasa, who believed Mitsunari was not rewarding the soldiers adequately for their service during the Korean invasion. But Hideyoshi's nephew, Hideaki, hated Mitsunari's guts more than anything, when the latter wrote a letter to the Taiko complaining about his nephew's reckless actions on the battlefield. Things only got worse when Tokugawa Ieyasu began spreading rumors targeting Mitsunari and holding him responsible for Hideyoshi's decision not to reward Hideaki with the province of Chigoku, due to his unhinged behavior at the first siege of Ulsan. Despite Mitsunari playing a pivotal role behind the Japanese victory in these campaigns, there were heavy casualties, and he grew a tad bit infamous among the battle-driven samurai, who perceived him to be more of a bureaucrat rather than a samurai warrior. The Western Army versus the Eastern Army. As Hideyoshi's health began to deteriorate, toward the end of his life, he accused his closest adult male relative, Toyotomi Hidetsugu, of attempting a coup. Given Hideyoshi had failed to produce any son throughout his life, he had appointed Hidetsugu as his heir. But after the miracle birth of his son, Toyotomi Hideyori, Hidetsugu was subsequently ordered to commit seppuku along with his entire family on Hideyoshi's command. However, just 3 years later, in 1598, Hideyoshi passed away. Luckily, while on his deathbed, he managed to establish a regency government called the Council of Five Elders to ensure that his heir, Hideyori, could succeed his father once he was of proper age. With Hideyoshi's death, the Japanese forces in Korea were finally recalled, and due to the internal strife that led to the purge of his own family, the Toyotomi clan was left deliberately weakened. Meanwhile, Tokugawa Ieyasu's rising power became a matter of immense concern for the remaining members of the council. They were unsure of his loyalty to the Toyotomi government, given that Ieyasu began fraternizing with the past enemies of the Toyotomi regime right after Hideyoshi's passing. Soon, two primary factions emerged, the first being of Tokugawa Ieyasu, commanding the loyalty of many lords in eastern Japan, and the others led by Ishida Mitsunari, who had garnered most of his support from the hardcore Toyotomi loyalists and from the lords of western Japan. After the death of a respected council elder, Maeda Toshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu completely changed his gameplay and rapidly began recruiting retainers from the Toyotomi clan into his own. It was not even too hard for him, given that the clan already lacked a leader or a representation from a strong male samurai and were being led astray. Ishida Mitsunari, on the other hand, could lay down his life to protect the Toyotomi legacy, and felt like he owed his entire life to his late lord. So when Tokugawa's influence grew alarmingly, Mitsunari saw an opportunity and gathered all the Toyotomi loyalists at Sawayama Castle. Mitsunari then convened with trusted friends and allies, such as Otani Yoshitsugu and Mashita Nagamori. He also met with Anko Kuji Eiki, a military monk descended from the renowned Takeda clan, and this entire gathering marked the beginning of their alliance. Together, they extended an invitation to the head of the Mori clan, Mori Terumoto, and urged him to lead them against Tokugawa. So kids, that was exactly how the Western Army was formed. Following this doomed alliance, Terumoto strategically took over the Osaka castle as their central base, while Tokugawa's forces were engaged elsewhere. Although many feudal lords rallied under Tokugawa Ieyasu's banner, forming what came to be known as the Eastern Army, Mitsunari and his allies stood firm in their dedication to the Toyotomi cause, ready to confront the rising tide of Tokugawa's power. It was on September 8, 1600, that Ieyasu first received news of Mitsunari seizing Fushimi Castle while mobilizing his allies. By October 20th, Ieyasu was already informed of Mitsunari's troops being deployed at the grounds of Sekigahara in a defensive stance. It was during the dawn of October 21st, when one of the Tokugawa's advanced guards accidentally stumbled upon Ishida's army hidden behind the lingering fog from earlier rain. Initially obscured by the dense mist, both sides were naturally surprised to encounter the other, leading both armies to hastily withdraw. However, this brief encounter was just enough for both the parties to understand the proximity between them. Finally, when the last-minute commands were issued, the battle commenced and Fukushima Masanori, leading the Tokugawa troops, launched a charge against the Western Army's flank. The rain-soaked earth from the previous day's downpour further intensified the primal struggle, and when Fukushima's advance initially progressed, it still left his men vulnerable to Otani Yoshitsugu's assault from across the Fuji River. Now, the tides of battle turned when Hideyoshi's nephew, Hideaki, betrayed Mitsunari's side and attacked the Otani army from behind. At this critical juncture, the Western Army found itself outnumbered, leading many daimyo to switch sides in the heat of battle, and betraying Mitsunari to shift the course of the conflict. With Mitsunari's right flank heavily damaged and the center being pushed back, he had no option but to retreat. Sadly, the allies who stood with him till the end either committed seppuku or were captured by Ieyasu's men. Meanwhile, Ishida Mitsunari took one last chance in the middle of this raging chaos and escaped the battlefield. However, he could not get very far away as Tokugawa's men finally got to him. Now that he had finally lost the war and everything along with it, Mitsunari and his captured comrades were condemned to a public death. Following Ishida Mitsunari's demise, his head was severed from his body and displayed on a pike for everyone to see in Kyoto. Many legends have emerged about Ishida Mitsunari after his public execution, and because of his loss at Sekigahara, history eventually forgot his legacy, believing he was never a great bureaucrat or a warlord. But sadly, these historical accounts forgot to mention how almost half of his allies left him hanging in the middle of the battle and changed sides. If they had only had the patience to stick it out till the end, Japan would probably not be unified under the Tokugawa shogunate for the next 200 years. Even the Shogun TV series showed us how the odds reversed from Lord Ishido's favor and fell into Toranaga's lap, with Lady Ochiba turning her back on Ishido and losing the support of the heir's banner after reaching the battleground. His defeat on the grounds of Sekigahara was inevitable. Do you guys still think Lord Ishido from Shogun is the villain of this story? Let us know in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!